So let's talk about some of the problems that people have pointed out about, particularly that neoliberal model. Um, so there's sort of two big critiques we want to make. There's actually a lot of critiques. I'm just going to focus on two because, why talk about this all day long? But the first one I want to sort of talk about is this idea that when you implement it, it imposes a Western model. Okay, now let's just think about this for a second. Is the free market, all that thing we had on that last page, free market equals economic growth, free market capital, is that a Western model, or is that just, okay, so is that what the West says is good? I don't know why I'm writing this down. Says is good, or is it just what is good? Does that make sense? I'll give you an example about medicine just for a second here, okay? So in the West we have, medicine, right? And medicine is sort of backed up with science. So let's say we go to another country that hasn't sort of developed that much. And let's say that in this some of the towns and villages of this place, if you go to the doctor, it's going to be, let's say, a shaman or a witch doctor, okay? And when you get sick, you give money to the witch doctor, and the witch doctor will come and sort of sprinkle blood around, do some other things, some rituals. Now, when the West comes in, when you come in, we kind of want to say, look, here's the deal. That stuff is super weird. It doesn't do anything. It just, you can't just sort of sprinkle blood around the house and all of a sudden you're cured. The way you do that is with medicine, science, Western model, all that kind of stuff. So we essentially come in and say, here you go, here's medicine. We have just made you better. Now here's the question. Is sort of trading in witch doctors for Western medicine, is that what the West says is good, or is that just straight up what is good? We think it's just straight up what is good. Like the other is just like weird stuff. They might say, particularly that witch doctor might say, that's just what the West says is good, but it's not actually good. All right, now here's why I'm going after that, is because essentially the way that we treat this neoliberal economic model, at least in the West, is we don't say that's what we think you should do. We say that's what you should do. Like that's just science. That's how it's done. So that's the question here is free market capitalism. Is it universal? It's what you should do. It's what's good. Or Western. It's what we say is good, but not necessarily what is good. From our perspective, who cares, right? We believe this. We believe it's all the same thing. But here's the thing. So let's say you even get past that. It also comes with Western ideas and values. It's going to come with a sort of new kind of colonialism. And I'll talk about that here. But just from our medicine perspective again, a doctor should be a scientific person. That's how you should think. That's how you test things. Faith, those sorts of things, screw that kind of stuff. That doesn't really do it. You can understand why that is sort of Western ideas being imposed in some of these societies. Or we could talk about, again, the value of women and women's ability to choose their roles in society. We think they should be able to choose what they want. Some societies would say that undermines what it means to be a woman. Now, we think that's just the universal, what it means to be a woman and how we value women. But others might say that's a new kind of colonialism where you're just sort of walking in and telling us how to think about things. Another thing is that it destroys local culture and leads to homogenization. There's this thing called the Starbucks effect. And so you see a Starbucks here, which is, I think, in Saudi Arabia. I'm not exactly sure where that's at. But essentially, you have a free market, and so corporations can bring their stuff in from all over the place. So Starbucks comes in, this multi-billion-dollar company comes in and puts a Starbucks in your neighborhood. This Starbucks is backed up with multi-billion-dollar stuff. And it's put right next to this mom and pop coffee shop in Ethiopia who is backed up by very little money. Who's going to win that competition? Starbucks is going to win. And what's going to happen is all the sort of local culture that's sort of embedded in those things is going to go away to be replaced by essentially Starbucks. And so now we all drink the same thing. There's no like Ethiopian style or Colombian or, Bangladeshi. It's all basically the same thing, homogenization. That's the Starbucks effect. And then, of course, the younger generation is also going to be very particularly attracted to sort of these ideas. It's going to be less excited about the local culture and more excited about the new cool Western things coming in. And again, over a couple generations, what then happens to this? It starts to go away. And so do we lose? By doing the free market model, we get economic efficiency, hooray, but do we lose out on the diversity of the world? Do we lose out on the separate cultures and all those things? They sort of become things of the past. We could also ask, are there other ways to do development? Now, again, from the Western model, this is the way you do it. Neoliberalism, there aren't any other ways. But there are other ways. I mean, China did a very sort of different way of doing this. There's different models out there. It's just that the US, EU, UN say there's only one way to do it. So that's one critique. One critique is this sort of the West telling the rest of the world what to do. A second critique or set of critiques is this idea of we shouldn't help the competition. And this is sort of what we call economic nationalism. If we help them develop, they'll compete for our jobs. So the United States maybe comes along and says to a very poor country, like let's say Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso, it's a country in Africa, very poor. U.S. comes along, helps them to develop, invests in them, does things to help them develop. And now let's say they're a developed country. Well, now on the international marketplace, Burkina Faso companies are competing with U.S. companies for trade, for contracts and things like that. And so why should the United States invest our stuff in them where they'll just turn around and compete with us? So the argument goes, it's better that they're poor than us, and so people start to rally around their nationalism. Is this a valid reason to not help poor countries? That's kind of the question I'd like you to sort of think about with this whole thing. So I'm not going to have you guys do an assignment today. I'm not going to have you do a discussion. It's really just doing this, thinking about it. I do want you to watch this next video about coronavirus and just think about how the coronavirus, just the lockdown of the coronavirus, how that might impact you in your situation, whatever that is. But at least, probably as far as I know, you're all in developed countries. And how it might impact somebody in an underdeveloped area or undeveloped country. So that's it. See you next week.